For most of my life, I misunderstood what love was supposed to feel like. I thought it would arrive with noise, with excitement so strong that it would shake everything inside me. Movies, stories, and the endless opinions of people around me all seem to describe love the same way. Intense, dramatic, overwhelming, the kind of emotion that takes control of your thoughts and leaves you breathless every time the other person walks in the room. For a long time, I believed that too. I believed that when love finally appeared in my life, it would feel like a storm, something powerful and impossible to ignore, something that would disrupt everything and force me to admit that my life had changed forever. But the truth turned out to be something very different. When I met you, nothing felt like a storm. Instead, everything felt calm. And that calmness confused me at first, because when you spend years believing that love must feel chaotic to be real, a peaceful connection can seem unfamiliar. It almost feels too quiet, too steady, as if something must be missing. But as time passed, I began to understand something important. Nothing was missing. What I was feeling was simply a different kind of love, one that didn't rely on constant intensity to prove its existence. It began with something small, a conversation that lasted longer than I expected, a conversation that didn't feel forced or rehearsed, but natural. The kind of conversation where words appear easily because neither person is trying to impress the other. Instead, both are simply being themselves. I remember how easy it was to speak with you. There was no pressure to say the perfect thing, no fear of being misunderstood. The moment you spoke, it felt as if we were already familiar with each other in a way that didn't require explanation. That feeling stayed with me long after our first conversation ended. It wasn't excitement that made me think about you afterward. There was curiosity. Not the kind of curiosity that feels restless or impatient, but a gentle curiosity that makes you want to learn more about someone, not because you're trying to win their affection, but because understanding them feels meaningful. The more we spoke, the more I noticed something unusual. You listened, not in the distracted way people often pretend to listen while waiting for their turn to speak, but genuinely, you paid attention to the details of what I said. You remembered things I mentioned casually, and you asked thoughtful questions that showed you cared about the answers. That kind of attention is rare. In a world where many conversations feel rushed or superficial, your presence felt deliberate and calm. It made every conversation feel important, even when we were discussing something simple. And slowly, that calmness began to spread into the way I felt when I thought about you. There was no pressure, no urgency, no anxious wondering about whether you would reply to a message or whether I had said something wrong. Instead, there was trust. Trust that our conversations would continue naturally. Trust that whatever we were building between us didn't need to be rushed or forced. At first, I didn't know how to interpret that feeling. For years, I had seen relationships where excitement burned brightly at the beginning, but faded quickly once the novelty disappeared. People mistook that intensity for love, only to realize later that what they felt was simply temporary attraction. With you, the experience was different. Our connection didn't depend on dramatic moments. It grew through the small ones. A thoughtful message, a shared laugh over something ordinary, a quiet conversation about life, dreams, and the lessons we had both learned from our past experiences. Each moment felt simple, yet meaningful. And the more time we spent getting to know each other, the more I realized that calmness was not the absence of emotion. It was the presence of something stronger. Peace. Peace is something people rarely associate with love. Yet it may be one of the clearest signs that a connection is genuine. When love is built on peace, it does not demand constant reassurance. It does not create confusion or emotional chaos. Instead, it provides stability, a sense that the person beside you understands who you are and accepts you without needing you to become someone else. That's what I felt with you. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to impress someone or prove that I deserved their attention. I could simply be myself. And somehow that was enough. I remember one evening when we were talking about the experiences that shaped our lives. The conversation moved naturally from one topic to another. Family, work, the mistakes we had made, and the lessons we carried with us because of those mistakes. At one point, you said something that stayed with me. You said that life teaches people patience in ways they often don't recognize at first. When things don't happen as quickly as we expect, we think something is wrong. But sometimes the delay exists because we are still becoming the person we need to be before we meet someone important. When you said that, something inside me shifted. For years, I had wondered why certain relationships never lasted, why connections that seemed promising eventually faded away. I questioned whether I had simply been unlucky or whether I had somehow misunderstood what love was supposed to be. But hearing your perspective helped me see those experiences differently. Perhaps the waiting had a purpose. Perhaps those earlier relationships ended because they were never meant to last. Perhaps they were simply preparing me for the moment when I would meet someone whose presence felt different. Someone whose presence felt calm. As our conversations continued, I began noticing more qualities that made you unique. You had a quiet strength about you, the kind of strength that doesn't need to be announced or displayed dramatically. It reveals itself through actions, through the way you handle challenges, the way you remain thoughtful, even when life becomes stressful, and the way you treat the people around you with kindness. Kindness, I realized, was one of your most natural qualities. You didn't reserve it only for special occasions or important people. You offered it freely to everyone you encountered, whether it was a friend, a colleague, or even a stranger who needed a moment of understanding. Watching that kindness in action made me admire you even more. Because kindness is not weakness. It is strength. It requires patience, empathy, and the ability to see the world from someone else's perspective. The more I observed those qualities in you, the more certain I became that what I was feeling was not temporary. It was something deeper, something steady, something that didn't need dramatic gestures to prove its importance. And slowly that calm feeling began to feel familiar rather than strange. Instead of questioning it, I began to appreciate it. Because calmness meant that the connection between us was built on understanding rather than excitement alone. It meant that we could face life's challenges together without fear that a relationship would collapse under pressure. It meant that whatever we were building had the strength to grow with time. Looking back now, I realized that the calmness I felt when I met you was not something to question. It was something to treasure. Because sometimes the most powerful emotions are not the loudest ones. Sometimes they are the quiet ones that settle into your heart and remain there, steady and certain, reminding you that love does not have to feel chaotic to be real. Sometimes love simply feels like peace. And before I met you, I didn't know a feeling could be this calm. The calmness that surrounded our connection didn't disappear after the first few conversations. In fact, it slowly became something I started noticing in every interaction we shared. It was present in the pauses between our words, in the way our conversations flowed without effort, and even in the quiet moments when nothing particularly important was happening. Before meeting you, silence in a conversation often felt uncomfortable. It created a subtle pressure to keep talking, to keep entertaining, to keep proving that the connection between two people was strong enough to avoid awkwardness. But with you, silence felt different. It felt natural. There were moments when we would pause in the middle of a conversation and simply exist in the same space without needing to fill the quiet with unnecessary words. And strangely, those moments felt just as meaningful as the conversations themselves. That was when I began to realize something important. Real connection is not measured by how much people speak, but by how comfortable they feel when they don't. With you, comfort was constant. Not the kind of comfort that leads to boredom or routine, but the kind that allows two people to relax completely in each other's presence. The kind that removes the invisible pressure many relationships carry in the early stages. You never tried to impress me, and I never felt the need to impress you. Instead, we were simply honest. Honesty became the foundation of everything we shared. Whenever we spoke about our lives, our thoughts, or even our uncertainties about the future, the conversation always returned to the same place: truth. You spoke about your experiences without pretending they had been perfect. You shared stories about moments when life had challenged you, moments when you had to grow, adapt, and learn lessons that were not always easy. Listening to those stories made me respect you even more, because strength is not measured by the absence of difficulty. It is measured by how someone responds to those difficulties. And the way you spoke about your past reveals something very important about your character. You never carried bitterness. You carried understanding. That understanding made you patient in ways that were rare to see. When people spoke to you, you listened carefully. When someone disagreed with you, you didn't rush to defend yourself or prove them wrong. Instead, you considered their perspective and responded calmly. That level of maturity created a sense of balance in every conversation we had. Balance is something many relationships struggle to find. Often, one person speaks more than the other. One person leads every discussion while the other simply follows. But with us, it felt equal. Both of us shared. Both of us listened. Both of us respected the space between our thoughts. And slowly, that balance created something even more valuable. Trust. Trust is not something that appears suddenly. It builds gradually through consistent actions and small moments that prove someone's reliability over time. Every time you kept your word. Every time you showed kindness without expecting anything in return. Every time you treated our conversations as something meaningful rather than casual. Those moments quietly strengthened the trust between us. And with trust came something even deeper. Security. For years, I believed that love always involved a certain level of anxiety, that feeling of wondering where you stand with someone, the uncertainty of whether the other person feels the same connection you feel. But with you, that anxiety never appeared. Instead, there was clarity. Not because we had made any dramatic declarations or promises, but because the way we treated each other made everything clear without needing to say it directly. Respect was always present, care was always visible, and honesty remained constant. Those qualities created an environment where love could grow naturally. One evening, while we were discussing something simple about our daily routines, I suddenly noticed how relaxed I felt. It wasn't a dramatic realization, just a quiet awareness that settled into my thoughts. I wasn't overthinking anything. I wasn't analyzing your words or searching for hidden meanings behind them. I was simply enjoying the moment. And that realization surprised me, because overthinking had once been something I was used to. In past connections, I often found myself wondering whether a message meant something more or whether a silence meant something less. But with you, there was no need for that kind of analysis. Your sincerity removed the uncertainty, and that made everything feel lighter. As time continued passing, we began sharing more than just our thoughts. We shared our perspectives on the future or what we hoped to achieve, the kind of lives we wanted to build, and the values that mattered most to us. Those conversations revealed how aligned our outlooks were. We both believed that relationships require effort from both people. We both believed that communication should remain open even when conversations become difficult. And we both believed that love should feel supportive rather than restrictive. Hearing those beliefs reflected in your words felt reassuring, because alignment in values is often what determines whether a relationship can grow into something lasting. Two people might share attraction or excitement, but without shared values, those feelings often fade when life becomes complicated. With you, the foundation felt stronger. Our connection was not built only on how we felt in the present moment. It was also supported by the way we both viewed life, responsibility, and commitment. That foundation created something stable. Stability, I realized, was what had been missing from many of the relationships I had witnessed in the past. People often rushed into connections driven by excitement, only to discover later that they had never truly understood each other's values. But we were doing the opposite. We were learning about each other slowly, carefully, and honestly. There was no pressure to move faster than felt natural, and that patience made everything feel genuine. One afternoon, while reflecting on everything we had shared so far, I thought about how unusual it was to feel this calm about someone. For years, I had imagined that when the right person entered my life, my emotions would feel overwhelming. That I would experience excitement so intense it would overshadow everything else. But what I felt with you was different. It was not overwhelming, it was steady. Steady like a quiet certainty that grows stronger with time rather than fading. And slowly, I began to understand that the steadiness was far more powerful than the dramatic emotions I once expected. Because steadiness lasts. It remains present through both exciting moments and ordinary ones. It remains present during laughter and during silence. And most importantly, it remains present when life becomes difficult. Looking at everything we built so far, I realized something important. The calmness I felt when I met you was not the absence of emotion. It was the presence of something deeper than excitement. It was peace. A peace that came from knowing I had met someone who understood the value of patience, honesty, and genuine connection. Someone who didn't need dramatic moments to prove that our conversations mattered. Someone whose presence felt reassuring rather than uncertain. And the more time we spent getting to know each other, the clearer it became that this calm feeling was not temporary. It was the beginning of something lasting. Because sometimes the strongest emotions are not the ones that arrive suddenly and disappear just as quickly. Sometimes the strongest emotions are the ones that grow quietly over time, becoming stronger with each shared moment. And the calm I felt with you was exactly that kind of emotion, a quiet certainty that something meaningful had begun. And that certainty continued growing with every conversation, every shared thought, and every moment where the connection between us felt natural and real. As time moved forward, the calmness that had first surprised me slowly began to feel like the most natural thing in the world. It no longer felt unfamiliar or unexpected. Instead, it became something I quietly looked forward to whenever we spoke, whenever we shared another conversation, or whenever I found myself thinking about the simple presence you had brought into my life. What I began to understand during those days was that calm love does something powerful to a person. It doesn't distract you from your life. It doesn't pull you away from responsibilities or create emotional chaos that consumes your thoughts every hour of the day. Instead, it steadies you. It allows you to focus on your goals, your work, and the direction of your life, while still feeling supported by someone who genuinely cares about your well-being. That was what I started to notice in myself. Before meeting you, there had always been a subtle restlessness inside me. Even when things in life were going well, there was a small voice in the back of my mind asking questions about the future. Questions about whether I was truly where I was supposed to be. But as our connection continued to grow, that restlessness slowly faded. Not because everything in life suddenly became perfect, but because I felt less alone in facing the unknown. One evening, we were talking about something very simple. I honestly don't even remember what started the conversation. It might have been about work, or about something we had both seen earlier that day. But at one point, you said something that stayed with me long after the conversation ended. You said that life becomes easier when you stop trying to control everything and start trusting the direction it's taking you. At first, those words seemed simple, but the more I thought about them, the more meaningful they became. For years, I had been trying to control my path, trying to understand every step before I took it, trying to make sure every decision would lead me exactly where I wanted to go. Yet, life rarely works that way. Sometimes the most important moments arrive quietly, without warning, and without any dramatic signal telling you that your life is about to change. Meeting you had been one of those moments. I hadn't planned it, I hadn't expected it, and yet it had become one of the most meaningful connections I had ever experienced. As I reflected on that realization, I began to understand something important. Perhaps the calm feeling I had when I met you was not just about love. Perhaps it was also about trust. Trust that life sometimes knows where it is guiding us, even when we don't fully understand the path ourselves. That idea made me appreciate our connection even more, because it reminded me that meaningful relationships are not created through pressure or urgency. They are created through patience, honesty, and the willingness to let something grow naturally over time. With you, everything grew naturally. There are no expectations that either of us had to change who we were in order to fit into the other person's life. Instead, we respected the individuality that each of us carried. You had your ambitions, your dreams, and your responsibilities. I had mine. And rather than competing with each other's goals, we supported them. That support became one of the most beautiful parts of our connection. Whenever you spoke about something important to you, I listened carefully. Not because I felt obligated to, but because I genuinely wanted to understand what motivated you, what inspired you, and what you hope to accomplish in the years ahead. And you did the same for me. You asked questions about my goals and listened to the answers with curiosity and encouragement. Those conversations created something deeper than attraction. They created partnership. Partnership means recognizing that two people can grow together without losing their individuality. It means supporting each other's dreams rather than feeling threatened by them. With you, that sense of partnership appeared naturally, and that made our connection feel even stronger. I also began noticing how comfortable it felt to share my thoughts with you. There were things I had rarely spoken about before, ideas about life, experiences from the past, and even certain fears about the future. But with you, those topics didn't feel heavy or difficult to discuss. You listened without judgment. You responded with understanding rather than criticism, and that made every conversation feel safe. Safety is one of the most powerful elements in any relationship. When people feel safe with each other, they no longer hide parts of themselves. They stop pretending to be perfect, and instead they become honest about who they truly are. That honesty strengthens the connection between them. With you, I felt that safety growing stronger every day. And the more it grew, the more I realized how rare it was. In a world where many relationships are built on temporary excitement or superficial attraction, what we were building felt deeper. It felt stable. And stability, I realized, was exactly what I'd been searching for all along. There was one particular moment that made this realization even clearer. It happened during a conversation late one evening. We had been talking for quite some time, and the conversation had gradually moved from lighthearted topics to more thoughtful reflections about life. At one point, there was a long pause. Not an awkward pause, just a quiet moment where neither of us felt the need to rush into the next sentence. And during that silence, something unexpected happened. I felt completely at peace. There was no pressure to say something impressive, no concern about whether the conversation was interesting enough. Just a quiet understanding that the moment itself was meaningful. That silence spoke more clearly than words ever could. It revealed how comfortable we had become with each other's presence. And in that moment, I understood something that had taken me years to learn. Love does not need constant excitement to be real. Sometimes love simply feels like peace. It feels like sitting beside someone and knowing that nothing needs to be forced or proven. It feels like trusting that whatever the future holds, you will face it together. And that understanding made the calm feeling I had when I met you even more meaningful. Because calm love does not fade quickly, it grows stronger with time. It grows through conversations, shared experiences, and the countless small moments that slowly build a connection between two people. Looking back at everything we had shared so far, I realized that the calmness I felt was not something temporary. It was the beginning of something lasting, something that didn't rely on dramatic emotions or constant intensity. Something built on trust, respect, and genuine understanding. And the more I thought about it, the more grateful I felt for the journey that had brought me to this point. For the experiences that taught me patience, for the years that helped me understand what truly matters in a relationship. And most importantly, for the person who showed me that love can feel calm without losing its depth. Because before I met you, I never imagined that the strongest emotion my heart could feel would be peace. Yet somehow, that quiet peace had become the most powerful feeling of all. And every day that passed made me more certain that what we were building together was something worth protecting, nurturing, and allowing to grow naturally into the future. As the connection between us continued to deepen, something else began to change inside me. It wasn't only the calmness I had felt since the beginning. It was a new awareness about how much a single person's presence can influence the way you experience the world around you. Before meeting you, my days followed a predictable rhythm. Work, responsibilities, occasional conversations with friends, and the quiet moments in between where I reflected on where life was going. There was nothing wrong with that rhythm, but there was also something missing from it. Not excitement, not distraction, just meaning. Life felt like a series of tasks that needed to be completed, responsibilities that had to be handled, and goals that needed to be reached. But the emotional depth that makes those things feel worthwhile was often absent. Then you appeared in my life, and something shifted. Suddenly, the smallest moments started to carry more meaning. A message from you in the middle of the day could change the entire mood of an afternoon. A simple conversation in the evening could turn an ordinary day into something memorable. It wasn't because the conversations themselves were extraordinary. It was because they were shared with someone who understood how to be present. Presence is a rare quality. Many people are physically present in a conversation while their thoughts remain somewhere else entirely. They listen just enough to respond, but not enough to truly understand what the other person is saying. With you, it was different. Whenever we spoke, your attention was fully there. You listened not only to the words, but to the meaning behind them. And when you responded, it was clear that you had taken the time to understand what I meant rather than simply reacting to what I said. That level of presence made every conversation feel important. It created the sense that what we were building together was not something temporary, it was something genuine. Over time, our conversations became deeper. We spoke about things that most people rarely discuss openly. The fears that sometimes appear when thinking about the future. The lessons learned from past mistakes. And the kind of life we hoped to create for ourselves. Those conversations revealed how much we had both grown through our experiences. Neither of us pretended that life had been perfect. We had both faced moments of uncertainty, disappointment, and unexpected challenges. But instead of allowing those experiences to make us cynical, we had allowed them to make us wiser. That shared perspective created a sense of understanding between us. Because when two people have learned similar lessons from life, they often recognize those lessons in each other. One evening, we spoke about the idea of timing. You said something that stayed with me for days afterward. You said that sometimes people meet each other at exactly the right moment in their lives. Not too early when they're still learning who they are, and not too late when their paths have already moved too far apart. Just the right moment. At the time, I didn't fully realize how meaningful those words were. But the more I thought about them, the more they made sense. If we had met years earlier, perhaps we wouldn't have recognized the importance of the connection between us. We might have been distracted by other priorities, other ambitions, or simply the uncertainty that often accompanies younger years. But now, things felt different. Now we understood the value of patience. We understood that meaningful relationships are not built overnight. They require time, effort, and the willingness to remain honest with each other even when life becomes complicated. And that understanding made our connection feel even more significant, because it meant we were not rushing into something blindly. We were building it carefully, with respect, with patience, and with the awareness that what we were creating deserved attention. As the weeks continued passing, I began noticing how naturally our lives started to intertwine. Not in a dramatic way, just through the simple sharing of daily experiences. You would tell me about something that happened during your day, and I would find myself genuinely interested in every detail. Not because I felt obligated to listen, but because understanding your world mattered to me. And you felt the same way about mine. You celebrated the small successes I mentioned. You offered encouragement when I spoke about challenges or uncertainties. Those gestures might seem small from the outside, but they carried tremendous meaning, because they showed that we were investing in each other's lives. Investment is what transforms a relationship into something lasting. When people invest their time, their attention, and their emotional energy into each other, the connection between them becomes stronger with every passing day. With you, that investment happened naturally. Neither of us had to force it, it simply grew. Another thing I noticed was how comfortable I felt sharing my thoughts with you. There were moments when I spoke about things I rarely discussed with anyone else. Doubts about certain decisions, questions about the future, and even memories from the past that had shaped the person I had become. But whenever I shared those thoughts, you responded with understanding rather than judgment. You never tried to dismiss my concerns or pretend that everything should be simple. Instead, you listened, and that listening created a sense of trust that grew stronger with every conversation. Trust is one of the most valuable things two people can build together. Without trust, relationships remain fragile. But when trust exists, even difficult moments can strengthen the connection rather than weaken it. With you, trust was becoming the foundation of everything we shared. One afternoon, while thinking about everything that had happened since we first met, I realized something that surprised me. The calm feeling I had experienced at the beginning was still there, but it had changed slightly. It had grown deeper. At first, the calmness felt like a gentle reassurance that our connection was real. Now it felt like certainty. Certainty that what we were building together was meaningful. Certainty that the patience we had shown each other was allowing something genuine to grow. And certainty that the years I had once spent wondering whether I would ever meet someone like you had not been wasted. Those years had simply been preparation. Preparation for the moment when the right person would finally appear. Looking back, I understood that love does not always arrive with dramatic signs or overwhelming emotions. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through conversations that feel effortless, through moments of silence that feel peaceful rather than awkward, through the gradual realization that someone has become an important part of your life without either of you needing to force that change. That was what had happened with us. And as that realization became clear, I felt something that at once seemed impossible. Gratitude. Gratitude for the patience that life had required from me. Gratitude for the experiences that helped me recognize the value of a connection like this. And most of all, gratitude for the person who showed me that love does not have to feel chaotic to be powerful. Because sometimes the strongest love is the quiet kind. The kind that grows steadily, day by day, until one day you realize that the calm feeling you once questioned has become the most important part of your life. And with you, that calmness had become exactly that. As the days continued to pass, the calm certainty that had slowly grown between us began to feel even more real. What once felt like a quiet possibility had now become a natural part of my life. I no longer wondered whether the connection between us meant something important. Instead, I found myself appreciating how naturally everything had unfolded. There were no dramatic turning points or sudden confessions that changed everything overnight. What we had built together came from time, patience, and the countless small moments that often go unnoticed by the outside world. Those moments, simple as they were, had slowly created something meaningful. I remember thinking one evening about how different life felt compared to the years before I met you, not because my responsibilities had disappeared or my goals had changed, but because the emotional weight of walking through life alone had quietly faded. Before you entered my life, there had always been a quiet distance between me and the future. I moved forward with determination, but the road ahead often felt solitary. Even when surrounded by people, there were moments when I wondered whether anyone truly understood the path I was walking. But with you, that feeling slowly disappeared. Not because you tried to solve every problem or change the direction of my life, but because you listened. You understood the meaning behind the things I shared, and you treated those thoughts with care. That kind of understanding created a sense of companionship that I had rarely experienced before. Companionship is different from simple attraction. Attraction can be powerful at first, but it often fades when two people discover they do not truly understand each other. Companionship, however, grows stronger with time. It develops when two people learn to respect each other's thoughts, dreams, and experiences. That was what we were building together. I began to notice how often I looked forward to our conversations, not because they were filled with excitement or drama, but because they felt genuine. There was no need to perform or pretend. I could simply speak honestly, and you would meet that honesty with the same openness. That balance created something rare: trust. Trust is not created by promises or declarations. It grows through consistent actions, through the quiet reliability of knowing that the other person values the connection just as much as you do. Every time you remembered something I had mentioned days earlier, it showed that you cared enough to listen carefully. Every time you asked thoughtful questions about my day or my plans, it reminded me that you were invested in the life I was building. Those small gestures meant more than grand displays of affection ever could, because real connection is rarely dramatic. It is built through patience, attention, and the simple act of showing up again and again. As time passed, we also began speaking more openly about the future, not in a way that created pressure, but in a thoughtful and reflective way. We spoke about the kind of lives we hoped to create, the goals we wanted to achieve, and the values we wanted to carry with us into the years ahead. Those conversations revealed something important. Our visions for the future were not identical, but they complemented each other in meaningful ways. We both believed that happiness comes from balance rather than constant pursuit of success. We both valued honesty and respect in relationships, and we both understood that love requires effort from both people to truly grow. That shared understanding made our connection feel even stronger, because when two people approach life with similar values, they can face challenges together without losing sight of what truly matters. I also began noticing how much peace our connection brought into my life. It was not the kind of peace that comes from avoiding difficulties, but the kind that comes from knowing that someone stands beside you with genuine care. Life still presented its challenges, as it always does. Work could become stressful, plans sometimes change unexpectedly, and responsibilities continue to demand attention. But during those moments, the calm presence of our connection remained steady. It reminded me that I was no longer facing everything alone. There were times when we simply talked about ordinary things: a story from your day, a small success at work, or a funny moment that happened unexpectedly. Yet, even those simple conversations felt meaningful because they were shared. Sharing life with someone does not always require grand adventures or dramatic events. Often it is the quiet moments that matter most. The conversations at the end of a long day, the laughter that appears unexpectedly during an ordinary discussion. Those moments create memories that stay with you long after they happen. Looking back on everything we'd experienced so far, I began to understand something important about love. Love is not always about finding someone who completes you. Instead, it is about finding someone who walks beside you while you continue becoming the person you were meant to be. With you, that journey felt natural. You encouraged my ambitions rather than competing with them. You supported my ideas while sharing your own with honesty and confidence. And through every conversation, it became clear that what we were building was not based on temporary emotions. It was based on respect. Respect for each other's individuality. Respect for the experiences that shaped us. And respect for the connection that had grown between us over time. As I reflected on all of this, I realized something that once seemed impossible. The calm feeling I had when I first met you had not faded. Instead, it had deepened. What began as a quiet sense of peace had slowly transformed into something stronger, a certainty that what we shared was real and worth protecting. And in that realization, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the journey that brought us together. Gratitude for the patience that allowed our connection to grow naturally, and gratitude for the person who showed me that love does not always arrive with noise or urgency. Sometimes it arrives quietly, sometimes it begins with simple conversation, and sometimes it grows so naturally that one day you realize it has become an essential part of your life. That was what had happened with us. And as the days continued to pass, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. The calm feeling I once questioned had become the most meaningful part of my life. Because real love does not need to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes it simply needs to be true.